I'm Adrian. I'm a senior account manager working in the London office. I've been working at the company now for 5 years.
And I'm Dave, Business Director, again, in the London office. I've been working at All Response Media for 10 years. Okay, so as this podcast is going to be focusing on the B2B market, Adrian, I think it's probably a good place to start is defining what the difference is between B2B and B2C. So what do you think are the main differences?
So there is a lot of differences when it comes to B2B and B2C marketing. I think the main difference is obviously the type of user that you're advertising towards. B2B is very much business focused, which means that although you are selling a product or a service, that key messaging is going to be completely different. When we're looking into B2C marketing, it's very much a sense of urgency in that messaging that you're getting across there. However, from a B2B perspective, it's identifying kind of companies' pain points and addressing those pain points. Your client or your company will be that solution to that and kind of addressing those challenges that companies might be facing.
Amazing. So you mentioned challenges there, and I suppose there are quite a few challenges when it comes to the B2B market space and advertising there. And I suppose the first one really is the use of firmographic data. Now, firmographic data is essentially the ability to target a specific company, a specific sector, job titles, the amount of people at those companies. But when we're looking at our core channels, so Google and Meta, they're a bit limited in that respect.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can use LinkedIn for that, and it's a great starting point. But at All Response, we like to go beyond the obvious, right? So we dig deeper into the audience, which I know we're going to talk about a bit later, but what we tend to use are stuff like trade publications. We use programmatic suppliers that have the ability to overlay first-party data, which is taken from white papers where people sign up to read more about a specific topic, and they can overlay that with the IP address of a specific company that you want to target. On top of that, you can also use that data for out of home, you can use it for audio. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do throughout the funnel for these.
Yeah, just to add to your point as well, when we're looking at kind of Google and Meta, there are a lot of third-party audience overlays that you can kind of work with. So from a Meta perspective, you can use, or you can kind of go directly to those audience profiling third parties and plug that into kind of like this platform. So although you are able to get that firmographic data, it's not as granular as you would get from a LinkedIn perspective, but it's still a lot more kind of efficient and a lot stronger than what you would tend to see in those platforms anyway.
Absolutely. So one of the points we kind of discussed there was around marketing throughout the funnel and the fact that we have the ability to do that. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how we can go about doing that?
Yeah, so in terms of marketing through the funnel, I would probably say that that is one of the key importance from a B2B perspective. The sales cycle is a lot longer when we look into B2B. It can take up to about weeks, months, or even years for a sale to go through. So it's very important to kind of nurture those users that you're targeting from a B2B standpoint and getting them from that top of funnel awareness phase and kind of bringing them down that conversion funnel. Again, as you mentioned, we do partner with a lot of kind of B2B suppliers out there that has that scope and capability to utilize more upper funnel channels such as audio, video, and even out of home as well, utilizing that firmographic data and then just bringing them down that funnel.
Yeah, so you've spoken there about the longer sales cycle, and that is something that can put off a lot of businesses from going into this market. I mean, some of our clients have a sales cycle of 8 to 9 months, and they're kind of used to the whole process behind it. However, if you're starting out in the space, it can be quite daunting. Yeah. When we're talking about LinkedIn, as an example here, if you're doing a more broader targeting, your CPM can be anything between, let's just say, 7 to £11. But when it comes to B2B CPMs on LinkedIn, we could be talking in excess of 100, and that can be quite daunting for businesses are trying to get into this space. But what we know with the whole B2B market space is generally when that sales cycle is 8 to 9 months, the actual payoff at the end of that is going to be a lot more. It can we've got a good example which we'll talk about later, but it could be in excess of 20 million, which makes that effort well
in the
worth
grand scheme
it.
of things, the payoff is.
Another key consideration in B2B advertising is how to target senior decision makers at different companies, because they're the ones that are going to purchase your product, right? So I think firstly we've got to then work out how to define our audience, how to hit this audience, and at Arm we deploy a work, rest, play strategy when it comes to audience definition, which essentially means we're working out the media mindset of these individuals at all the different parts of the day, which means we can select the right channels and also select the right messaging that will resonate more with that audience.
When we're looking into that work, rest, play strategy, within those key decision makers, what you're wanting to do is very much kind of target them when they're in their most productive. So in terms of that mindset, it's going to be that work mindset there. So in terms of kind of like examples, when it comes to actually adopting a strategy, potentially down weighting spends on a weekend when they're not kind of working, or even in the evenings as well when they're in their rest period. Also if we're looking into out of home, potentially utilising kind of key travel periods as when you're wanting to show your ads. Commuter times, when they go out for lunch, and even kind of the key areas when they're travelling into work are as well. And then also as well, if you're looking into kind of utilising those third-party trade publications and getting their database to send out to their subscribers, you can pick a time when they're going to be at their desk working, so that will be in their inbox, top of mind, and you're able to kind of hit those senior decision makers at the correct time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go beyond that, we've actually done a lot of testing with some of our clients on the right days to send out these solus emails, the right times. So we've got a lot of data that backs up this theory and making sure that we're targeting the right audience at the right time.
Perfect. And then the final consideration to kind of look into or talk about today is around restrictions in data. With B2B, you're obviously going to be affected by GDPR if you're advertising within the EMEA region, but also from an American standpoint, you do have those laws and restrictions in place from a California perspective as well. So in terms of kind of like the data that you're able to basically utilize and report back on, you're going to be limited on that.
Yeah, I think another one to talk about there is Germany, which is a unique ball game in itself. It's got a double opt-in procedure for collecting leads, where it's not okay to just once get their consent to take their data, but you need to email them. They need to then accept it again for a second time. So it's these nuances that we need to be aware of within this sector. But overall, like you've mentioned, US is moving that direction, and I definitely think that's happening because across the wider US landscape, it's a lot potentially easier, dare I say it, to target this audience. But more and more states are implementing more and more privacy laws. So overall, it's going to be a similar ball game in the near future. But it's one for B2B marketers to be aware of, is that potentially your wider US campaigns might be slightly more efficient at this point in time. But again, we've spoken before about the payback, and it's definitely worth doing that in EMEA like we do for some of our campaigns.
Yeah. So in terms of industry trends that we're seeing from a B2B perspective, what is it that we're seeing that is shaping the future?
So I think as a whole, we're seeing kind of a rise of personalized marketing, making sure we're providing tailored solutions for individual businesses. And I suppose as a whole, that's brought about the rise of account-based marketing, or ABM. Do you want to explain what ABM is for everyone?
Yeah, so in terms of ABM, I think the most simplest terms that we could potentially kind of describe it as is you as a marketer advertising to like a specific company or companies. So there's two different kind of ABM strategies to adopt, which is ABM one-to-one, which that is very much, again, targeting a specific company. With that, you'll have kind of your sales team kind of talking to those specific accounts that you're targeting, just to identify any pain points or anything that they're experiencing at the moment, which means that you can tailor that creative, whether that's a social creative or even like an email send as well. But that messaging there will be very tailored and personalized to that specific company. When we're talking about ABM cluster, which is the second part of it, that is very much kind of grouping a lot of accounts or companies together. That can be through industry verticals. So if you're wanting to go for biotech or pharma, going or grouping your key accounts into that, or it can also be another example of it could be in terms of lapse customers as well. So people that you have previously advertised towards, but it's kind of gone a bit cold. So you just do want to continue serving ads to them and just kind of keeping your client or brand top of mind.
Absolutely. Two great strategies. The one-to-one, I'd say, is for companies where that sales cycle has a big payoff at the end. It requires a lot of manpower. It requires someone to know the ins and outs of every single business that they're representing. They need to be on calls, so have their phone numbers on the landing pages that we're taking people through to. But from a ABM cluster point of view, it's otherwise known as ABM Lite, and that's because it is a lighter version of this. And that can be used by companies targeting the SMB market, or that just want to target a wider base, because then it doesn't require as much manpower in order to know the ins and outs of every single business. It's, as you say, they can know the ins and outs of the pharma industry as a whole, or the biotech industry as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of channels that you would probably consider running ABM activity, I think the obvious one here is obviously LinkedIn, just because of that strong firmographic data that they have. You are able to target specific accounts within the LinkedIn targeting. But I suppose you're also able to run ABM across all channels or every channel. It's just identifying that firmographic targeting and scoping out that opportunity there. It may take a bit of time just to find that right targeting, but it doesn't mean that you are limited just to email sends or even just social activity through LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds corny to say, but it is a case of be smarter with the activity that you're running. You mentioned the funnel earlier, and there's partners that we can use to target through out of home. You find a specific business and you can target billboards on their way home, or even to work. So definitely some great strategies that we can employ throughout the funnel. So we've mentioned in that last section about the differences between potentially larger business and those that are smaller or SMB. What do you think are the core differences that we would tend to employ when pulling together a strategy?
Yeah, so in terms of going for larger businesses, I guess you do have that manpower and also the budgets to be able to run that ABM strategy. I wouldn't necessarily say that if you're going from an SMB point of view that you do have that opportunity there for you. SMB or small to medium businesses, you wouldn't necessarily kind of run that ABM strategy on that one. It's more kind of it's more broader in the sense of there are going to be a lot of SMB opportunities out there, so you're going to try to cast the net as wide as possible to then ensure you are getting that sale come through. One thing to also consider as well is where your audiences are. Just having a look into audience profiling tools to identify what media they're kind of consuming, Because from a LinkedIn perspective, if you are going for small to medium businesses, for example, retail, it might mean that the owners or the managers at that small retail shop might not have a LinkedIn profile and say that they are kind of like an owner there. So that's kind of like one of the key considerations that I would probably say, looking into kind of whether you're targeting a larger company or an SMB.
Yeah, absolutely. As you've said, it is a lot broader to go for the SMB market, so you can employ a few more of your B2C strategies across that. But I think one of the main formats that we try to use, especially with the larger businesses, but it also works for SMB, is lead generation formats.
Yeah.
And that it basically allows the company to record the person that's come through, what company they're at, the company size, the industry, and then they can market them for free through organic emails. So it's definitely a strategy that we would employ across most of our campaigns. So Adrian, how do we help our clients stay ahead of the curve within the B2B market space?
Yeah, so in terms of that, it's very much staying on top of what's happening from a marketing point of view, looking into those innovations that all channels, all medias are launching out with, and just kind of keeping that communication open with your client, just to make sure that they are up to date with everything going on. Because as we've mentioned, you know, Facebook or like Meta and Google may not necessarily have that firmographic targeting to start off with, but they might get into that space, they might introduce a lot more firmographic targeting. So it is very much keeping that communication open with your client and just letting them know what's going on from a marketing point of view. But it's also looking into those new opportunities as well. So again, going back to that audience and kind of following that data from what we're seeing in terms of audience and their media consumption, that can change over time. So it's ensuring that you are keeping on top of that, identifying any channels that you aren't necessarily utilizing at the moment and kind of putting that forward as a bit of a test. For example, senior decision makers on their commute times, if they're reading the newspaper during that period, is that an opportunity for your client to then start putting ads within the newspapers that they're reading? And it's very much kind of pushing that test, going out of the box in a way, rather than like not you limiting yourselves to the channels that have that strong firmographic targeting, but also expanding out to other channels where you're able to kind of broaden that reach, again, have that firmographic targeting there, but introduce new channels, new tests, and just see what works and what kind of what resonates better from your target audience.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I'm just going to pick out one thing that you said there to potentially wrap us up. But anything and every channel can be used for B2B. It's how you employ your strategies, how you can be smarter to ensure that we're pushing continued growth for our clients.